Hi folks, I'm Chuck Black. We're doing Quokka Prime from scratch, and today's lesson is host monitoring. So let's get started. So let's review where we're at. We've implemented host display and the host server. So I'm going to start those so that we can observe what's going on. I'm going to the server. I need to do export flask, and then I'm going to run flask, and that's flask running. Now I'm going to get another terminal. And from this terminal, I'm going to run the display. And notice there's no data in there. The reason there's no data is we haven't added any in. And remember, in our testing, what we did was we used Postman to add in some data. So we're going to do that just so that we can see that there's data there. We'll be implementing the monitoring functionality later in this lesson. So here's my Postman request. I'm going to do the send. I've clicked on the send. It's doing it. You can see the result in my Quokka server. Now if I go look at the display, you see it's counting down nicely for us very quickly because I've sped it up. When it gets down to 0, boom, there's the data. So that's what we have so far. The thing we're going to do now is implement monitoring. So the good news is I've already implemented the host monitoring functionality per se. I can just modify that by getting rid of the print stuff that we had in there from way back. So I'm going to get rid of my print hosts function. And then what I will do after I've deleted this is I'll go down and I will remove my references to print hosts in my main loop, in my main function. So I've gotten rid of that now. What I will want to do is create a function called save hosts because I need to save this information that I've gotten. Remember, we're going to save it in our Quokka service. So I'm going to create save hosts, or I'm going to call save hosts, and I will reference it twice here. Now I haven't written it yet, so after I delete this print statement that we don't need anymore, you can see that PyCharm is saying, hey, I don't know what this is, so I'm going to go down here and define my save host. I'm not going to actually implement it yet, but I'm going to define it. Eventually, PyCharm will get around to figuring out that, hey, this has actually been defined. And once it has figured that out, then we will be good to go to the next step. So in this implementation, I'm going to need to get hosts from the web server, from our Quokka server, and I'm going to want to update things as well. In order to do this, I'm going to consult with the version that has already been implemented. So if I go to Quokka Prime, that's where it's already been implemented in my monitors. I have something called host monitor. I'm going to use that, and it's going to help me to know what I need to do. Now there's an example where I'm calling something called get host. There's an example where I'm calling update host. And so I will be looking at that functionality in order to know what to implement here. So I'm going to come and I'm going to say get hosts and make that call. And I've forgotten that I need to assign my variable called host to what I return from get hosts. So get hosts is going to do that HTTP request. Let's go ahead and implement that now. I'm defining the function get hosts, no parameters. It's pretty straightforward. What I need to do is eventually I'm going to return hosts. Now, how do I do that? Let me go back and look at the code that I wrote earlier to do this. So what is the code doing? It's mainly that line that says response equals requests.get. So I'm going to need to implement that. So let's go back to our code and let's effectively implement that on our own. I'll be typing it in. I don't want to copy it because I'll learn it better this way. I'm putting it in a try except clause statement so that I can catch if it's not there. I'm going to say request library. That's what we're using. I'm going to say HTTP localhost 5000. That's the port we need to use, remember, is where our Quokka server is running. So that's looking good. I can do catch the exception. The exception I'm catching is request.exception.connectionerror. You'll remember this from the display. I'm doing a get, the same thing in host display from our last lesson. So if I get an exception, I'm going to want to print something out that makes a little bit of sense and tells me what the error is. So I'm doing an F string as I typically do, and I'm going to print out the error message in addition to my own text. And then I want to return an empty dictionary that will have no hosts in it. I need to do that, otherwise things will break. Now I also need to check the status code that was returned, and I'm expecting 200. So if it's not 200, and again, I'm going to print an error message. And this error message, not only am I going to do the message that I'm writing now, but I'm also going to print the actual reason, which I get back in that response object that gets returned. So I'm going to print out the reason. And again, I want to return an empty dictionary. Now everything's good, except I said return hosts. Well, the hosts are actually in the JSON data that I got back. And the good news is all I need to do is call this JSON function and it will return it for me. And now I'm going to print, and just to say, hey, we were successful getting this information. And so, yeah, I should be able to see that when I call this in the code. And eventually, if we look down at our code where we called get hosts, PyCharm should be smart enough to have realized it's there, and we're ready to move on. So I have a little house cleaning to do here. I see I'm using requests, but I didn't import requests. So what I need to do is what I did in host display. Remember, I told you that I had done something similar in host display from the last lesson, and that's basically what we need to do. So I need to do import requests. Somehow I ended up with request.exception from PyCharm, but I'm going to just do import requests, and now everything in that regard, all my requests should be working good. Now the other thing is I noticed that I did a per ping update of hosts, and I like that better because we get incremental updates and it looks cool when we're displaying it, when we update things one at a time. So I'm going to update my ping host to do an update host every time I get information from a host. And I'm going to make that change. We'll eventually be adding to that code and get that correct so that that will be a positive improvement on the way that I do things. So I'm glad that I've done that. One thing I noticed I did wrong is I said update hosts. I am updating just one host, so I need to fix that. One last thing I need to make sure that I do is I have save hosts still hanging around. I need to get rid of that because I'm updating them as soon as I ping them. And now we're good to move on. So now let's move on to doing the update host functionality. So you'll see that this is similar in structure to when we do the get. We're going to have a try and accept. We're going to use the requests library. In this situation, we're going to do request.put because we're going to be updating a single item. In this case, it is a host. My URL is going to be the same as it was before for the get, but I am doing a put, so that's different. So /hosts right there. Now I need to pass in some things. One thing is query parameters. And with the request library, this is how I do it. I pass in a dictionary with the keyword parameter called params, and I'm passing in the host name of that particular host. So we're updating one host in the Quokka server. And the last thing we need to do is we need to pass in that host data. And so that is what we're going to do next. And the way that I do it is very easy. I just say JSON equals and then the data. And the data is this thing I passed in called host. You see it up there. It's a parameter to update host. So that's all fantastically easy. So that's wonderful. Now this part will look familiar to you. We're looking for an exception, which is a connection error. If I can't connect to it because the server is down for some reason, I'm going to print an error message, and this is going to look very similar to what we have done before. So in this situation, I'm going to say I wasn't able to update this host, and I'm going to print out my host name. Remember, I have to use single quotes because I'm using double quotes for the F string. That's just how I've decided to print out this thing. I'm not printing E. Oh yeah, I am printing E. Here you go. Here's E, so you can see that. So that's good. And if I have that error, and then I'm going to return because I'm not doing anything more. Now I need to check the status code that was returned and make sure in this situation it will be a 204 that's returned. I've coded it so that it returns 204, which means here's a response but there's no data I'm returning because we've been doing an update, so we're not returning anything. If it's not 204, then I'm going to print out a message that says I had an error. I'm going to say my host failed, update the host failed. I'm going to print out the host name, and this will tell me that there was a failure in updating it. And I'm just looking at this. I'm not printing out the reason code. I probably should be doing that, huh? But I'm not doing, oh, nope. I am narrating this afterwards, and I see I did add it. So that's good. There we go, reason.status code, wonderful. And then I do a return. And if those conditions were not met, then guess what? We were successful in updating this thing that we've been updating, which is our host. And I will do that right now. Notice I forgot to do the F at the beginning because this is an F string. I need to do that. You can see my curly braces in PyCharm got changed to a different color. I'm going to print out the host name. It's going to say that I successfully updated it, and we seem to be okay. So this is looking pretty good right here. My update host is looking successful. Okay, here's a good lesson. I decide I want to clean things up, which is always a good idea. So I'm getting rid of unused import statements. I'm deleting those. I'm deleting this one at the top. And eventually I will get rid of that, and I will be at the point where PyCharm realizes that that has been fixed, but it still says there's one error. And I'm clicking on it, and it says local variable host is not used. Oh, why am I doing that? And now I realize, uh-oh, I haven't done discovery correctly. I haven't done discover hosts. I need to add my hosts to the Quokka server when I do the discovery. And so I'm going to delete this because that's how we're doing things now. Now I'm up here. I'm at the discover host code. I'm inside discover host. And what I want to do is what you see over there on the right, which is called update host. Another good reason that I made this update host choice a little while ago. So I'm going to update this host that I just created. Now I can get rid of all of my host references. In fact, I can get rid of returning host because that doesn't matter anymore. One last bit of cleanup of this answer summary. And so now I'm doing a good job of discovering the device and just updating it. If it's already there, it will update it. If it's not there, it will add it. So this is all good, and we're ready to move on. So we've written this code, and now we should be testing it. So let's go ahead and check things out as long as everything seems to be okay. Now I've opened up 3 terminal windows. One is the server, one's the monitor, one's display. I'm starting the server going up there. You can see it's running. It seems to be going okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the display. You can see the display is running. There's no data in there. That's because I haven't discovered and monitored anything. I'm having to run sudo because it is doing scapb arpping, which requires sudo privileges. You can see it's done that, and whoa, how cool is that? It's actually running, and not only that, look up at the server. It's receiving these requests, and all the responses are 204. That means it's happening well, and you can see there's gets happening, there's puts happening. Everything seems to be happy, and I'm pretty excited about this because, frankly, things rarely work the first time. And guess what? My display that is running and picking things up off of the server is running as well. How cool is that? And notice the 11:25 is my current time. I am going to be doing an update, and then I will be doing my display update. So if we look here on the display, you can see everything the last heard was at 11:24. So those were all at 11:24. Once this starts to run, it's updating things up there. You can see in the server window, it's updating that stuff. Pretty soon we're going to see the repainting, and guess what? 11:25. So it's all working. Oh, happy day. It rarely works like this, but it did this time. So what did we just do? We just implemented host monitor, and now we've got the whole thing going, the server, the display, and the monitor. Here's the monitor running happily, pinging devices and updating, as you can see in the upper quadrant, and down here in the display, it's updating the display as well. So that's all really cool, and we're at a point now where we can pretty much go ahead and move on to the next step. Hey, thanks for watching this episode on Quokka Prime from scratch. I'm Chuck Black. If you do have questions or comments, feel free to leave a message with this video. I'm also on Twitter at Chuck A. Black. If you want to send email with a question, comment, or just to say hi, the email address you can reach me at is python.52.weeks@gmail.com. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel. I hope these lessons are helping you to achieve your goals towards becoming a real software developer. So long for now, and see you at the next episode.